Hello and the warmest of welcomes to this another episode of Random Reviews. I'm your humble host Carl Mason, and in this week's episode we're taking a look at the debut studio album by one of the most legendary psychedelic rock outfits of all time, The Doors, and their sublime self-titled album. In this discussion we're going to be diving into the instrumentation, lyricism and motivation behind this brilliant project to explore why it's so special to so many people out there. So without further ado, let's get straight into the review. Doors were a powerful psychedelic rock band from Southern California. Birthed out the swinging 60s, the Doors' poetic approach to songwriting fused with their aggressive, psychedelic style made for one of the most unique album experiences of all time, as Jim Morrison and the Doors take the listener on a trip through the highs and lows of this at times disorientating album, as Jim barely lays out his experiences and feelings freely, harkening back to the bluesman of old as he channels his inner anger, apathy and angst, as well as his courage, conviction and creativity, to form some of the most human and honest lyrical content to come out of a rock and roll band ever. Pair this with the uniquely intoxicating sound of the band, cooked up thanks to Ray Manzarek, John Densmore and Robbie Krieger, and you have yourself a trip of an album and an experience you will never forget. I think that for many, myself included, the first thing that stands out upon placing the needle down on this record would be the predominant groove featured on the opening song, Break On Through to the Other Side, as John Densmore kicks off his song with that hypnotic drum beat that has such an air of anticipation behind it, as it draws the listener in to be hit by the rest of the band who contribute such a tangible feeling of movement to this song, and you really feel the tension and urgency that is reflecting on the desperation in the lyrical content. This feeling of frantic urgency is a real cornerstone of the band's sound, particularly on this album, and can also be seen on the lively Light My Fire, easily one of the band's most iconic songs, defined by its hastily driven instrumentation in the verses and solo sections, and how they contrast with some of the more slow stanzas of Jim Morrison's poetic lyrics, again lending to this feeling of desperation for something that Jim is searching for, be it the opportunity to break on through to the other side, or trying to find someone to light his fire for him. When it comes to talking about the instrumental composition of this, their first album, or even their last album, LA Woman, that I have a review for right here if you're interested, probably the most predominant piece of their sound is of course Ray Manzarek's jazzy approach on his organ, that truly drives the melody of the music, acting more often than not as the lead instrument in their mix. Just take for example the introduction to the song Soul Kitchen, and how Ray's Vox Continental combo organ drives the rhythm of the song. Just take a listen.
The clock says it's time to close now.
As you just heard there, the organ really is the focal point of the Doors sound, a signature if you will, and it's the manner in which Ray works in tandem with Robbie Krieger's fantastic flamenco-influenced guitar style. The band really did have one of the most unique sounds around, a sound the world would fall in love with. But what's a rock band without a truly charismatic frontman? And let me tell you, the Doors certainly had that in the legendary Lizard King himself, Jim Morrison. A man who represented everything and nothing, from a sex symbol to a philosopher. Jim Morrison embodied duality, and was not afraid to show the world his skeletons. Take for example the incredibly intoxicating Alabama song, a drunkard's anthem that was a cover of the German poet Bertolt Brecht's 1929 operatic composition of the same name, where Jim honestly explores his dependence on booze and women, taking us the listener along with him on a night of drunken debauchery through the feelings of fear and fun. Now this concept of exploring the duality of reality is also found predominantly on the simple but incredibly impactful song End of the Night, a song inspired by the poetry of William Blake that explores the concept that man was born to either joy or woe, which is reflected in Jim Morrison's lyrics here, and the juxtaposition of the lines, some are born to sweet delight, some are born to endless night, preluding to that idea that Jim was born to endless night, and that he was on a journey to the end of it. This feeling of wanting and desire for peace is one that is incredibly prevalent on this project, and dare I say might be the main motivation behind it. Take for example the lyrics of Break On Through to the Other Side, that are about Jim's fascination with the idea that through hallucinogenic drugs, one could break on through to other, higher states of consciousness. A concept inspired by Aldous Huxley's classic book, The Doors of Perception, the same source the band took their namesake from. A fantastic book that I can personally recommend, as it explores the depths of man's mind through the lens of Aldous's own introspective experience with the psychedelic substance mescaline. Now this is a really curious theme that was a part of the reason why this album was so closely connected to the consciousness shift of the 1960s and 70s. People were desperately looking everywhere for change. However, some forgot to look for it from within. The only place change can authentically come from. It's clear that by taking a look into the inspiration behind this band, the artistic integrity was of the utmost importance, and the honest expression was a central motif of The Doors, thanks to their off-the-wall and often explosive instrumentation and how that worked alongside the incredibly poetic and inspiring introspection of Jim Morrison's off-the-wall and often explosive vocal performances, making for a movement in music that would inspire a generation to search within themselves to recognise their own subconscious duality. Now this is something that had its hand all over the hippie movement, a culture often painted with the brush of nostalgia, as everyone thinks of this cultural movement as being all blissful, when in reality it was not quite that. It reflected a great deal of drug abuse, mental illness and ill will. Now it's this duality that this album explores and does so perfectly. At a time where mainstream music was anything but real and kept people shrouded in an artificial culture, Jim Morrison's honesty smashed through the doors of perception for many. So ladies and gentlemen, that's almost going to have to do it for this week's episode of Random Reviews, but there's a few things before I depart. Firstly, I wanted to go over my 3 personal highlights from this album, starting out with Backdoor Man, a cover of the Howlin' Wolf song of the same name, a classic blues song that the Doors really made into their own, contributing a tremendous amount of style and groove to their interpretation, making for a fan favourite for many, and just a fantastic moment in the context of this album. The next song that really stands out for me has to be Break On Through to the Other Side. Now this is just such a classic song containing all the elements that I love about the Doors, from their catchy and contemplative lyrical content to their expressive and explosive instrumentation. I just love it, and I'm sure you do too. And finally, my last personal highlight from this remarkable project is the Doors' Magnus Opum, the sublime psychedelic masterpiece, The End. A song that truly takes you on a journey in a way that not many other songs can, as its 12-minute duration opens up for limitless free instrumental exploration, while Jim regales the listener with some of his most dismal and quite frankly unnerving lyrics that add so much to the experience of this song. I mean, it's a real trip, but you already know that, so why not let us just take a listen.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. The end of everything that stands. The end. No safety or surprise, the end. I'll never look into your eyes again.
So on that incredibly intoxicating note, that's going to have to do it for this week's episode of Random Reviews, here on your home for musical discussion, Mason's Music Library. It's been my utmost pleasure to talk to you today about this groundbreaking album. The Doors' music has always been ever so important to me, and I could not wait to review this particular album, so I'm just glad to have had the opportunity to do so. Now I would love to know your thoughts on this album. What kind of feelings does it inspire in you, and would you say it's your favourite project by The Doors? Let me know down in the comment section below. But before you ramble on, I have of course this week's recommended listening list for you, just a few songs that nicely accompany this project. Starting out with What Goes On by the Velvet Underground, Summertime by the Big Brother and the Holding Company, and last but by no means least, Riders on the Storm by the one and only Doors. So that about does it for episode 29, and this was another big one for me, so I'm so grateful for you guys for tuning in. It really does mean the world. This album is one of real cultural importance, and it's a project to be enjoyed and celebrated with respect and admiration, and that's all I wanted to do here today. So I do hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Random Reviews, and if you would like to see more classic album reviews like this one right here, then by all means, subscribe to Mason's Music Library for more. And if you'd like your own vinyl copy of The Doors, then I have a link for you down in the description box. Other than that, thanks once again, and I'll see you in the next episode.